So welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us this lunchtime. I'm Claire Rayson. I'm the co-host of Lawyers Coach. I'm also the founder and director of Client Talk. Today's webinar celebrates the end of series 2 of Lawyers Coach. Each series has a theme that runs through it, and the theme for series 2 was success. And Oliver and I are going to be exploring that theme today in two contexts. So the first is the external idea of success, and in particular, what is a successful lawyer and how has that changed over time? We're then going to think about internal success, so purpose or value-driven success. I want to welcome back some of our speakers from series 2, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves now. I will also, before I do that, just invite you, there are a lot of us online today, so if people just pop themselves into speaker view, you'll be able to see the speaker in big screen. So if you haven't done that already, top right, and if you pop it into speaker view, you'll see who's speaking. But I'm just going to welcome back our speakers and ask them to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start off with Sarah, if I may.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Sarah Hawes. I'm the head of corporate knowledge at Herbert Smith.
I think Sarah's internet's gone a little bit wobbly there, so we'll come back to Sarah. But thank you, Sarah, for joining us. I'm going to pass over to James just to say a quick hello.
I'm James Lewindon. I'm head of legal resourcing for the UK at Connexo, which is Evershed Sutherland alternative legal service provider.
Thanks, James. Look forward to hearing from you shortly. Next, we've got Eloise.
Hi, I'm Eloise. I am a corporate solicitor. I specialise in tax law, and I'm also really interested in wellbeing. So I'm a yoga teacher. I teach meditation and mindfulness, and I do some professional development work as well with the Law Society.
Thanks, Eloise. Really looking forward to chatting to you later. And then last but definitely not least, we have Susan.
Yes, hi, I'm Susan Lamb. I'm in-house legal counsel at Shell, specialising in information management compliance. I too have a real interest in wellbeing and lead the care and legal programme for the Shell legal function. And I've also recently qualified as a neuro-linguistic programme master practitioner. So really pleased to be here, Claire. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Well, we'll talk about NLP maybe later as well. So fantastic. Really looking forward to speaking to you all today. Before we speak to the panel, we're just going, in fact, I've got one other person to speak to before we move over to the panel. We're going to speak a little bit about success before turning over to the panel at about 10 past. We're due to finish today at about 1 o'clock. So hopefully that works with everyone's diaries. So the last person that I have to introduce today is my co-host on Lawyers Coach and also my co-host for today, and that is Oliver Hansard. So Oliver is going to be kicking today off by looking at why the concept of success is so powerful but also so limiting. So Oliver, over to you.
Yeah, last but not least, thanks for the introduction, Claire. And look, really excited about today. Obviously, because we can talk to all our fantastic guests, but the other thing that it enabled or reminded me to do was to go back and look at re-listen to the series. And my reflection out of that was a reflection I have in quite a lot of the coaching work that I do, which is what can be dangerous is that if you define success by everyone else's measures, that's quite limiting. It can be a limiting assumption that I'm not succeeding in other people's terms. And what I heard a lot about was about this kind of subjective notion of success, and that if I work out for myself what success is, I've got a much better chance of achieving it, doing it on my terms, behaving in the way that I want to behave. And for me, those are the most optimistic outcomes of the coaching work I do. And I got that real sense of optimism in terms of re-listening to series 2, because here we had a suite of people, and obviously we've got many of them on today, but a suite of people who'd either had that good fortune or been courageous enough to say, look, this is about me, this is about how I want my legal career to turn out. And I think that's fantastic. And I think not only should everybody be congratulated, and we should kind of rejoice about that on a personal level, but I think also if we can kind of amplify that sense of encouraging the rest of as many as we can in the profession to say, look, this is about our lives and our decisions, and us driving the careers in the way that we want to. I think that's a really good thing. So look, really excited about today and about the discussion. So let's move on to the guests, and let me start with you. Sarah, look, you've made that choice to go a slightly different route in Herbert Smith. Do you think that's you're the exception that proves the rule, or do you think that we should be maybe more optimistic about flexibility in law firms?
Well, I think that success as a metric of your career in a law firm has undoubtedly changed during the time that I've been at Herbert Smith Freehills, or since I first met Claire. It isn't just a straight partner up or out type model anymore. There are significantly more very senior roles in other parts of the business as the law firms have become bigger, more complex international businesses to service the needs of our bigger, more complex international clients. Many more senior roles have developed which are not in the partnership model. I mean, pick a team, whether it's business development, alternative legal services, legal operations, legal project management, knowledge and know-how. We're all there working alongside our lawyer colleagues to help deliver, better, more efficient client service. And as those roles have grown and developed, there is much more recognition of that, the need for that side of the business, and there need to be senior individuals in that side of the business to get the optimum outcome for our clients, which then of course we hope drives the optimum outcome for the firm. You need those different skills, that the cliche, the diversity of thought at the table, to solve our clients' complex problems and deliver the best outcome for everybody. So I don't think, if it was 20 years ago that success at a law firm meant be a partner or go and do something different, I certainly don't think it means that anymore. But then I'm probably biased because I'm not a partner.
Do those other voices, the non kind of lawyer fee earning voices, are they loud enough? Are they heard at that large table that everybody's now sitting around?
Absolutely, or certainly that's my experience of the firm that I work at, and the only one I've really worked at. Diversity of thought around the table is valued by the leadership. Internally, we have various structures in place, and a lot of those committees, those sort of governance bodies, are not just made up of partners. They're not just made up of lawyers, because the people who run our business are smart enough to know and understand that you need those different skills at the table to make sure we are getting the best results for our clients. So absolutely, I've certainly, well, probably not surprised to those who know, but I've certainly never had any trouble getting my voice heard. And I think the same would apply to most of my colleagues.
And so as you build then that team to work on those big deals, will there be a full range of non-fee earner as well as fee earners on those teams? Is that obvious to the client as those teams are put together?
Certainly at the largest end of the transactional spectrum. So, I'm an M&A lawyer by background. I still work in M&A broadly. You will find either a legal operations professional or a legal project manager, or perhaps, an alt manager in one of our alternative provisions being part of the client-facing team. Absolutely. On the sort of medium-sized, smaller deals, it's probably fair to say that those people are working more in the background. But no, certainly on the bigger deals, not only are they front and center, but probably, from the firm's perspective and the client's perspective, we may well be charging for their time as well alongside the lawyer's time, because both the clients and the firm, recognize the value that they're bringing and the efficiencies that they're probably driving.
So a client will be aware that in the background on those smaller transactions that there's that support team that are feeding into the end product.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll have the discussion with them at the outset when you set up the team, but then also, of course, we still, on most of our matters, we still bill in that slightly old-fashioned, hour by hour narrative type way, so those other individuals will appear on the bill.
And is that an effective way then of getting the diversity of thought that you mentioned during that podcast? Does that get those different perspectives into the transaction and into the client relationship?
It's certainly one way to do it, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, of course, my firm, as it's any of the big firms, are doing what they can to ensure that there is diversity of thought and diversity in its broadest sense among our lawyer population as well. But if we're talking about diversity of skills, then actually bringing along some of our other professionals, our other colleagues, is absolutely another way to attack whatever the client's problem may be in a slightly different way. People with different backgrounds, different experiences, different qualifications will obviously look at our client's problem, hopefully in a slightly different way, and stop us just doing it the same way we've always done it, just because that's the way we've always done it.
So you paint this, again, back to that word, optimistic picture of a collage of skills to deliver those client services, and therefore a range of different opportunities within the firm. My perception, having not worked in a law firm for a while, is still that there are silos of opportunity. What do firms need to do to shout about that range of opportunity that is existing but maybe not so well known?
Well, I think there are sort of natural ways that it happens when our junior lawyers come across on the deals they're working with, individuals like myself or my, LPM colleagues, whatever it is. So they learn by osmosis, but it is also something that the firm, or certainly my firm, I'm sure the others do it too, have recognised they need to be more vocal about in a couple of ways. Firstly, actually, the number of grad recruitment events that I do now is more than perhaps you would expect a non-partner to be involved in. So we're speaking even to our recruits, our potential pool of recruits, about other opportunities very early on. But also then once we've got the lawyers in the business, we have our kind of milestone development programs for them. And again, in each of those, there will be one or more panel type session not dissimilar to this, where you have conversations with non-partner colleagues about their pathways and about the choices and the decisions that they have made. So we are, if they haven't learnt by osmosis, by dealings with the different teams around the firm, we are then trying to put it in front of them and encourage them to ask us questions, what we did, how we did it, when we did it, to enable them to think more broadly if for whatever reason they decide that partnership isn't for them in the long run.
So that's an active process then. People even as they walk in at the start of their training contract maybe, but there's an active effort on the part of the business to demonstrate the different routes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, I should say on those milestone programs, once we've got our lawyers into the business, it's not just a panel of us, as in, non-partner roles in the firm. We tend to get in a couple of colleagues from in-house as well. So we're trying to help them make, have the broadest range of options and make the right decisions, both for them and for the firm in the longer term. Fantastic.
Coming over to you, James, is that your experience in Eversheds and Connexo, that there's that active discussion around the different ranges of opportunity in the organisation?
Yeah, I think a good example, Evershed Sutherland has got a really large legal project management, legal data technology, data analyst kind of pool of talent that is growing. And also the firm uses Connexo in terms of flexible support using consultants. So we've got teams who are, full-time employees, as you would expect normally for a firm to have, which are then surrounded by flexible part-time consultants, hourly rate consultants who are kind of boosting the skills profile and the experience levels of I suppose the traditional core of what a full-time team would look like. And because that merging of talent is becoming ever more diverse in terms of what legal teams need to have to be able to deliver for clients, that is enabling more people to enter and think about different ways of working than they may not have had 5-10 years ago.
Fascinating. So So there's something going on internally. How much of that, and this is something you covered again when you spoke on the podcast, how much of that is, I'm not sure whether this is push or pull, is insisted upon by the clients, that the clients demand, again, that diversity of thought and range of different people in the transaction. What's the client demand looking like?
So I think traditionally, as background, when we set the legal resourcing business up, it was purely into clients. So it was purely clients who were saying, I need extra support, I need consultants, I need different support mechanisms to be able to undertake transaction in an in-house setting. But the shift over the last kind of, I'd say, 2 to 3 years is law firms understanding, as an example, there are great pools of talent that are available on a flexible basis that can enable them to deliver services better to their clients. And I think whereas it was seen as a purely an in-house support structure, over the last number of years, that way of law firms engaging and supporting, I suppose, the consultant pool has meant a real kind of mindset shift. And I know, we're not the only law firm. Most other law firms now have their own talent pools that are driving and enabling them to use this kind of consultant market more to supplement their teams. And I think it's because clients are used to using very diverse teams to achieve projects or do legal delivery. Absolutely. And they're expecting their law firms to replicate that in how the law firms serve them in delivering some of these, especially large things like regulatory change projects.
So, and do you think that the legal industry is moving quickly enough to meet that expectation of their client?
That's a good question. I think it was moving. As an outsider, so I came into the legal profession 10 years ago with no legal background whatsoever. And for me, actually, the speed of change over the last 10 years compared to other industries has been rapid. In terms of, 5-10 years ago, the consultant market wasn't available. There was no such thing as kind of managed service. There was no such thing as kind of all these different technology and platforms and things that were available now. I think this last year has seen that considerable spike in different ways of working because the COVID pandemic has forced change and forced different attitudes to how people are working and how people are engaged. So I think it's been pretty quick compared to other industries in terms of legal change over the last 10 years for law. I think in the last year, 9 months, has been even faster. And I think what has happened is now moving forward, it's how the legal industry keeps up with the momentum that has been generated over the last year or so in terms of different ways of working.
And any thoughts onto priorities for legal firms to really take advantage of that opportunity and that change?
I think alongside diversity in not just gender and race and et cetera, it's diversity in thinking as well. But first, also well-being. I mean, I think it's great. We've got Susan and Eloise on who are going to be talking. Understanding and the pressures that people are under in terms of allowing well-being and different ways of working to match how people can best perform. And I think how law firms and in-house teams enable different ways of working, different engagement models to enable well-being as this kind of speed of change happens over the course of the next year to 2 years. Sorry, go on. Have we lost Oliver then?
There may be am I breaking up?
Yeah, you're back now, Oliver.
Am I back? So maybe one last question for both James and Sarah, which is, and I think this comes from James talking about maybe the courage needed to go an alternative route in through a legal career. Is what advice would you give to someone? Let's start with Sarah. What advice would you give to someone early on in their legal career as how they should think about the range of opportunity that's there for them?
I think you've got to seize opportunities, haven't you, and try things when they are offered to you, whether they're instantly appealing or not. I mean, we're fortunate enough in our big law firms that we work in for secondment opportunities in particular to come up pretty frequently, whether that's 6 months at a client in an in-house team, or 6 months for me into the knowledge team, or again, we have secondments in and out of our legal project management team or BD, for lots of good business reasons. But when those things come along, just giving them a try, or if you're tapped on the shoulder and asked to do it, just giving them a try, because certainly for me, that was the thing that meant I had other options and personal experience to look to when I had to make those big decisions at the critical points in my career. So yeah, take the opportunities. Don't turn them down.
Great. James, how would you advise a young lawyer to think about the range of opportunity that exists or may not exist in their law firm?
Yeah, I think that law traditionally has been very set out. It's been very, very narrow in how people perceive their career should operate. You either go up, progress in law firm kind of through the different tiers of promotion process in-house, that kind of perception of you go through the different tiers towards general counsel. I think that perception of what a career looks like in law can mean that people just are along for the ride rather than actually defining and understanding for themselves what they want their career to look like. So for any young lawyer or who is kind of new to the profession is to really ask questions of those around them. As Sarah said, what secondments have you been on? What opportunities are there for me to work in different ways? What projects can I work on potentially with legal project management or others? Talk to other clients. If you're a lawyer in a law firm, talk to your clients in what experience they had in transitioning across to in-house. What opportunities did they take advantage of? And I think rather than accept the career path that may be perceived as defined for you, it is challenge it by asking questions, because the one thing that I found over the last kind of 10 years is people love talking about their journeys in the legal profession. So ask them questions and they'll tell you all about it.
Brilliant. Great advice. Thank you. So that's a good examination of kind of external views on success. Let's go back to you, Claire, because you're got some thoughts on the internal notion of success.
Yes, thank you, Oliver. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to start off by opening up the floor to the participants through a poll, just to make sure we're all awake, and don't worry, no one has to put their cameras on for this one. So I'm going to do a quick poll, and there are 3 questions. So the first question that I have for everyone is, have you ever explored what your values are? And the choices that will be available to you shortly are: yes, they help guide me in my choices; no, but I feel that I am value driven. And then the last question, so the last response is, I have never really thought about it. So hopefully you'll be able to see the poll now. So the first question is, have you ever explored what your values are? Great, so some answers starting to come through now, and some people have already skipped on to questions 2 and 3, so please do. Question 2 is, how important is it for you that your firm company has clear values and purpose? And then the last one is, do you know what your firm's values are? So fantastic. I'll give about 60% of people have answered, so I'll give a bit more time. 70% now, so just a couple more minutes, and then not minutes, seconds. Fantastic. So some interesting results coming through there, and I'm just going to end the polling and then remember to share it with you, because I never ever do this. So right, here we are. So here are the results. So we've got some interesting results there. So in terms of, have you ever explored what your values are? That's interesting. So over half of the people online have explored their values, and they help guide people in their choices. So Sarah there mentioned big decisions in life, and that's sometimes when the values kicked in. But other people feel that they're value driven, and 8% haven't really thought about it. How important is it for you that your firm or company has clear values and purpose? Interesting there that no one put not at all. So either very important to you or somewhat. And do you know what your firm's values are? Happily, no one has said no. Some have only said somewhat, and some have said yes. So thank you for participating in that. That's really helpful. So I'm going to stop sharing the results now. So the reason I ask that is because I do a lot of work on values, both in the work that I do with individuals when I'm coaching, but also in the work that I do with firms when I'm doing strategy work. And for me, they're really powerful. And the reason why they're powerful and the reason why I love them and I use them so often is because they help give us a direction. So whilst lots of things change constantly, values are something that largely stay constant. And they've been particularly powerful in firms this year. So it's interesting to see there that everyone has a sense that actually, yes, their firm's purpose or values is important to them. Because I think this year in particular, lots of people have been questioning what their firm offers them. And I think lots of the corporate wrapping has gone this year, working from home, lots of what perhaps was box ticking before isn't there anymore. So the office, lots of that wrapping not there anymore. So what a firm believes in has come under the spotlight, and purpose and values are becoming increasingly important to employees and also to clients. So what are they, and why am I talking about them in the context of success? So values are beliefs. They are something that's important to either us as an individual or us in the context of a firm. They help us find purpose, particularly important when we're doing work, when I'm doing work with firms around what the corporate values and purposes are. They guide behaviour, and they also help us develop a sense of self. So I'm going to give some insight into what my values are to help put them into context, and then hopefully that will give us an idea of why I'm talking about them in the context of success before I turn over to Eloise and Susan to flesh it out a bit more. So my personal values, I have done a values based exercise as you know on the receiving end of coaching. And I think about them, not every day, but I think about them relatively regularly. And my values are authenticity, independence. Anyone who knows me will know that I'm fiercely independent. Sarah's smiling there because I've known Sarah for a long time. Faith, and also fairness. And when I've had big decisions to make in my career, those values have really helped guide me and helped me to make decisions that otherwise would have been quite difficult for me to make. And my corporate values are quite similar, I guess, to my personal values, but they are active listening, empathy, and diverse thinking. And those three values really guide me as a business. They help to provide direction, to show who I want to work with and the sort of work that I want to be doing. So I am offering those to everyone today, just to give an insight into what I value and what values are for me. And why do they tie into success? The reason for me why they tie into success, and the reason why I'm talking about them today, is because they help people to realise that success is subjective. So we've heard from Sarah and we've heard from James around how that external idea of what is success as a lawyer has changed. So it's moved from being this idea of you either become a partner in a firm or you become a GC in-house to something else. So the consultancy model we've spoken about different roles within a law firm. So now what I want to do is I want to open up to Eloise and to Susan to talk about this idea of success in a slightly different way. And I'm going to start with Eloise because ceasing opportunities was something that Sarah mentioned, and I think if there's one panelist that has definitely done that, Eloise, it's you. You've mentioned just a few of the things that you do there. You've done so much. You've got, you know, the portfolio career that so many people speak about is definitely something that can be used to describe you. So I'd just be interested to find out from you what success means for you.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and it's definitely something I have thought about a lot, especially over the last few years. I think what can happen with a lot of like young lawyers is that because the legal path is so clearly defined and like very well structured as a career, at least in its more like traditional form of like trainee, associate, and then maybe onto partnership. I think a lot of people who study law at university just think, oh, that's the path that I'm on. And that was definitely my journey as well, like just being a law student thinking like I'll probably end up, you know, either going for partnership or becoming a senior associate and then doing something else after that. And I think I'd never really given much thought to like the way you explored your values there was something I definitely had never done while I was sort of choosing my own career. And then I sort of had my own existential and career crisis where I thought like, this is actually a career I'd picked for myself when I was like 16, 17. And I didn't really feel like that person anymore. I felt like my own values had shifted a little bit. And I didn't know how to make my career reflect that because I was already like on this very well-defined path. And I had all these other interests like well-being and so like meditation, mindfulness and yoga and those kind of things. I didn't really know how to like bring them together. And I was also a little bit nervous about doing that because I couldn't really see a model of people who were doing that around me. So everyone else was quite focused on this very like traditional view of like a legal career. And I hadn't really seen those like blended careers where you're bringing other elements of your passion into your legal life. So for me, I guess success was trying to really engage with the question of like what it was I cared about, what it was I wanted to do, and then doing the quite difficult and scary work of trying to make that happen. So I think it would have been much easier just to be like, well, you know, I'm passionate about these other things and maybe like, you know, in my vacation time or like at the weekends, I might be able to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but like just sort of ignore it on the Monday to Friday like working week. But I think what I challenged myself to do is really like blend in my passions with my work as well. So try and get involved in the legal community, but also like, you know, my passion for well-being and stuff and bringing those two things together. And so I think, yeah, success for me would be like really thinking about it and doing the work of figuring it out and then actually trying to put it into practice. And those are quite like difficult, like long-term like tasks to do. It's not easy, I don't think.
And you've had, you know, again, kind of coming back between this idea of external success and perhaps a success is something that we define for ourselves. You know, you've had lots of what I guess people outside looking in would define as, you know, success, both in terms of, you know, where you went to university and the fact that you're a successful lawyer in the city. What for you has been kind of your key successes, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's always so interesting because I think when you do achieve all the kind of like external measures of success, there's a certain amount of like emptiness that comes along with that. Not to be like too depressing about it, because obviously those are like incredible successes and I'm like really proud that I did do that. But at the same time, I think because they were measures of success that other people thought were successes, and that was why I kind of went for them, like studying law, going to a certain university, getting a certain kind of job. Those are all things that I hadn't really ever really thought about myself. I just kind of taken them as like measures of, you know, amazing like life milestones, which they are, of course. But I think for me, success is always like things that have come out of doing that work of figuring out what my value system is and what I really want to achieve. And it's normally something about like giving back, or kind of, you know, you hear the cliche of like, that's when you really feel most engaged, when you're like working with other people and trying to give something back. But for me, that has always been true. So I think like my real successes have been working with the legal community, doing stuff like meditation and mindfulness, especially with junior lawyers. And probably my biggest success, or one of them, like writing this book for junior lawyers, which was like a professional development book. And in doing that, I really felt like I was able to give something back to people who would have been in my position a couple of years ago. And yeah, like providing some actual like assistance or guidance to junior lawyers, I think, yeah, is when I feel most successful.
And do you think junior lawyers, I mean, you mentioned there that, you know, you choose a career early on in your life, and particularly if you choose to go into a legal career, you know, it's at a time reflecting back on myself, you know, I mean, Sarah and I were both corporate lawyers living the dream. Sarah still is. I jumped ship, but I didn't have any commitments. I didn't have the 4 children that I now have. My life, what I wanted then was very different from what I want now. When you work with junior lawyers, do you think that they still want similar things, or do you think that actually now what they're looking for is more balanced?
Yeah, I definitely think it's hard to compare, because obviously that's the only experience of the profession that I've had. I've only been a lawyer for 5 years, so I'm fairly still early in my legal journey. But I would say that definitely the university students and the people who are looking for training contracts now are much more values driven. So they'll be thinking, where do I actually want to take this? And a lot of them will say straight up, I only want to do this for a few years, and then I want to bring in other elements, or I want to have the portfolio career, or I have all these passions and I want to show those as part of my application strengths, and I want to introduce myself as this person with this full life before I even step foot in a law firm. And I think that's also being supported by recruitment teams and graduate recruitment people who are reaching out and saying you should be able to bring your whole self into the legal environment. You should be able to bring in all of your passions, and your different elements of your life should be able to have a home within your legal career as well. So yeah, I'd say definitely the generation coming up and thinking what's my purpose, what am I here to do, what do I really enjoy doing, and then they're trying to shape their career around that.
And I'm going to jump to James quickly, because you're obviously on the recruitment side. Can you see different pressures from the people that are coming in and what they want?
Yeah, I think that the move towards a different kind of structure of where they work, how they work. I think, I talked on the podcast, location is a big issue for people. I think one of the challenges that many had was they wanted to live potentially further away from where opportunities lay in where either law firm offices or in-house offices were. And because of the last 9 months, location isn't an issue anymore, which is giving more freedom to where people want to live and how they work in terms of the places they can offer their services compared to where the locations are. But also, I think the kind of opportunities that people want to have, I think what we're seeing increasingly is people looking at their career as a portfolio. So not just a linear one experience, it's a portfolio of experiences where they can move between different opportunities, both in-house and in private practice, in different clients. And that kind of demand for different experiences and different ways of working is definitely increasing.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question of Eloise, and then I'm going to bring Susan in. So I mentioned there, and I know we spoke on the podcast about values, and I know that that for me ties in a lot to mindfulness as well. Do you see people being more driven by the purpose and values of the firm than they were before? I mean, obviously in terms of the reflections of you, because I think when Sarah and I started at Herbert Smith, I'm not sure how I didn't there wasn't really a discussion around what's the values of the firm that we're going into. It wasn't really a thing, I don't think. Do you see that amongst kind of younger lawyers coming up, that is something that they're interested in and they want to find out more about?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's always a real tension between the mission statement of a firm and the reality of what it's like to work as a junior lawyer in the corporate world, which is that it's obviously still a very traditional corporate challenging environment. And I think there's sometimes a little bit of there's a little bit of naivety in saying as a junior lawyer, oh yeah, you should be able to do this and you should be able to demand these things from the firm. And I would never encourage anyone to go into the legal profession thinking single-handedly they're going to be able to demand and receive the career that they want, a 9-to-5 if you're going into a big US or a Magic Circle firm, for example, might be an unrealistic expectation unless you're going into a very specific role. And I think it's good for junior lawyers to have a realistic picture of what it is that they're the type of career that they're committing to, and the demands of the job, and the nature of the work, especially in the transactional teams. And so if there is going to be change in terms of a more movement towards like a set of values, or a more mindful business, like the mindful business charter kind of principles, then it has to be a systemic change which is really led by people who are running the businesses and not by sort of junior lawyers. Even though we can do so much as like the future of the legal profession, I think there also has to be people at the top who are like navigating and driving that change from the top down, which I think there is a movement towards that, and I think that's really encouraging. But also, like, junior lawyers should be a little bit realistic about the commitment that they're taking on. But then I think also in conjunction with that, you can, as a junior lawyer, bring your own principles and your own values within like a big organization. So things like mindfulness and like meditation and well-being, your own personal practices, they can be really supportive as you go into an environment that is a little bit more challenging, or like something that's a bit of a step up from what you're used to, like at university or whatever. And so I think, yeah, there's a mix of both things. There's like looking at the values that the firm says that it promotes. There's also taking into account the reality of a very challenging, demanding corporate environment. And then there's like having your own set of personal sort of values and principles and well-being practices that are going to support you in like sort of bringing together like the value system and like the reality of working life. So yeah.
Thank you. Susan, I'm going to bring you in now, and I've got lots of questions, lots to discuss with you. And Eloise mentioned well-being there, and I know that that's something that you're passionate about and that you spoke to Oliver about on the podcast. But I'm actually going to start off just by asking for your reflections on the discussion so far, because you are the client voice in the room, and I was just interested for your perspective, from your kind of client hat on, any reflections that you've got from the conversation so far.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with all the things the panelists have said actually so far. I mean, the diversity that Sarah mentioned and having a diverse team is something that clients do look for. And I can't remember who it was that said that now, but we as a company are a diverse set of people, and we bring diversity and inclusiveness actually as well into that is one of our values. And so we expect and really want our law firms to do the same, because we know that the diversity of thinking that you get is good business sense. And so why wouldn't lawyers be offering the same service to us as clients? So that's absolutely the case. And also the ability, the health and wellness part of this as well, being able to have lawyers that are on their A game is what we want. We pay high fees, and we do want our lawyers to be able to perform well. And we also understand that to do that, they need to have all the good things about health and wellness as well in themselves. So you can't expect a lawyer who's been up 4 nights in a row or working all-nighters to be on their A game when they come to give Shell some legal advice. And that's not the kind of lawyers that we want. So actually, Eloise talked about the Mindful Business Charter. We've also, in our panel firms, just piloting, call it a We Care Charter. And because we recognize as in-house lawyers, we have, as clients, we have to help the law firms with this as well. So we're making a joint commitment with them that whilst they're working with us, we will abide by certain principles to mind everybody's health and well-being. So yeah, I mean, what else did the diversity of teams? Yeah, and the authenticity, bringing your own self to work, is definitely what clients want from their law firms, and they know it. All this makes good business sense. It really does.
It's really interesting, because I think this year for me, that's been one of the big, positives of 2020, that I think, the client voice is been really loud and strong this year in terms of empathy, in terms of diversity, in terms of, really kind of, standing up and saying what they want from law firms. So nice to hear that reflected in your words, because I think you know, so often with law firms, you know, it's easy to say, well, that's what our clients want, but actually if the clients are coming back and saying, well, no, that's not what we want, really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, another interesting perspective is that I mean, Shell has 1,200 lawyers, and we all across the globe. So we are a mini law firm, and so we've been doing all the very same things that we want our clients to do. We've been doing our law firms to do ourselves. So we have a legal operations function now, and we have project managers, and we have PSLs as well. So we ourselves are having a very diverse team. And you know, it just makes sense that we expect our law firms to do the same, because it just makes, we just end up with better business decisions at the end of the day, and that's you know, that's what we're all driving for at the end of the day.
And one of the things you spoke to Oliver about on the podcast was well-being, because I think that's something that you're very passionate about. So can you just tell me a little bit about what you've been doing in that regard?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really passionate about the fact that the law is such a great subject, and I think it's a great career. You know, the skills that you need as a lawyer, of being an analysis, and you know, really challenging your thinking, I think are really great skills, and I love that. But the fact that it's become, you know, one of the most stressed professions, when you look at all the surveys around burnout, there are some startling statistics. And it's our particular character traits, you know, our perfectionism, our pessimism, always having to find what's going wrong. I mean, that's what we spend our lives doing. And that, you know, that great imposter syndrome that we've all got, not being good enough. That's like a perfect storm for mental health and problems over stress and anxiety for lawyers. And so it comes from a place that I do genuinely want lawyers to be able to thrive as lawyers. And we've had lots of conversation here today about doing other things, and that's also great. And Sarah talked about her journey, and I'm in-house. I'm not in a Magic Circle law firm, so I've taken on an alternative journey as well. But I think the perfect world will be that if as a lawyer and junior lawyers coming up can actually choose also to do that trajectory that we all kind of know and love, the up to partnership, and be balanced and happy and thrive and their best selves every day. I mean, that's the nirvana that I would like to see ultimately, but we've got a long way to go in law firms. You know, I think Eloise said it's got to come from the top. It's got to be really driven from the top to get that change. So what I've been doing is just my little bit in my own world in legal in Shell. We've got 1,200 lawyers, as I said, and I've been working with Shell Health, their human performance and care team, to really drive a culture of care and well-being into the function, we call it. So that's both lawyers and that horrible term non-lawyers, we'll call them other professionals, and looking at how all of our behaviours, both from senior leadership down and with regards to each other and our own selves, because as Eloise mentioned, we all have our own accountability to ourselves to look after our well-being, but how we can really support and help drive that as a culture, as a set of behaviours in the function. So for example, one would be working in a team, having conversations, structured conversations, to really look at what care means amongst the team and how we treat other people with care. So, you know, is that, I mean, you know, we all have different ways of working. We want our flexibility, but we don't necessarily want to impose our flexibility on other people. So if we send emails on a Sunday morning, that might be okay for us because that's how we're navigating our balance in life. But it doesn't mean to say that people have to respond to them on a Sunday. So that's like having a conversation at a team level about all our different ways of working and how we're all achieving that balance and respecting that and just being aware of it so that we can watch out for each other as well. So there's lots of little things that we've been doing like that to really drive that caring culture.
And as you said, pushing that back also now to your law firm panel, so that they're thinking about
absolutely. I mean, we've heard a lot that that if law firms are, when the client says you want something done, you say how high. But there are lots of cases, and it's not just. I mean, we obviously interface with the law firms because we're the intermediary between our business and the law firms, and you'll often get the business saying, "Oh well, we'll get these documents back 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." And our job is to push back on the business and say, we don't need them at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. There's no need for these lawyers to work overnight on our documents. We can get them at midday and then we'll work on them. And it's our job to do that, rather than this macho culture of, well, we're paying their services, let them work all night or miss their theatre trips. Obviously there will be times when that's necessary. We have, like Eloise said again, we have to be realistic. We're in business and we have to run a business. But it's not always that you have to put documents on your client's table at 9 o'clock on a Friday and say you want them the next day. That we're trying to cut all that kind of behaviour out.
I wish there were more clients like you around when I was training, because as you say, that was quite a common occurrence. I have so many other questions for you, but I'm sure I want to open up now for questions, either for panelists, if you've got other panelists to ask other panelists, or if people want to take themselves off mute and ask a question, please do. I'll have a quick look at the chat to see if any questions have come in.
Steve's got a question. Hello, Steve.
I've just put a question on the chat, which Susan, you've obviously picked up. So
no, I haven't actually. I haven't seen it.
So I'll ask out loud. There seems to be a three-stage process here with, other than Susan, the panelists communicating what they want to their organisation, and then the organisation communicating to the client, and the client bouncing back to the organisation. So I wonder how comfortable participants feel having the direct conversation about their values with their clients. And Susan, would you welcome that or not?
Well, having direct conversation with my, yes, I mean it's quite a personal thing in a way. I mean, Claire's been very good at sharing her values with us. But so I think you have to be wary of that, because not everybody wants to have those conversations. But at a corporate level, in terms of understanding the kind of values that your business stands for, and your business is going to be behaving in that kind of way, I think, yes, absolutely. I think that's a really good conversation to have directly, rather than going any sort of through the middle, as it were. I mean, what does anyone else think? James, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's happening. I think there's the Legal Mindful Business Charter, which is a collaboration between in-house teams, law firms, to do exactly what Susan was saying in terms of fairness for pressures that are being put on law firms by clients and vice versa. And the only way that actually a consensus can be approached within the legal industry is by law firms challenging clients, and clients challenging the business stakeholders, and the business stakeholders challenging the clients in terms of turnaround times. The only way you can actually get consensus, an agreed way of working to enable well-being in the profession, is by having those collaborative conversations. I think we're still on that journey, but a good example is the Mindful Business Charter that a lot of firms and a lot of in-house organisations have signed up to. I think that is just part of that collaborative approach, which is the only way that change can happen, I think.
Thanks, James.
But I would say that we're still at quite an early stage here. For example, is we ask lots of guests to come on to the podcast, and their comms teams don't want them to be involved, or they do a recording and the comms teams then have to go through the recording and edit bits out. So I think, at the risk of putting a cynical hat on, yes, our obligation, I suppose, as a group is to champion these sorts of conversations. But I think we're quite early on in the process of everybody being able to bring their whole self to work, as I think Eloise described it.
We've got a couple of questions that have just come in, so I'm just going to deal with those questions quickly, and then if there are more questions, feel free, if you want to take yourselves off mute, feel free to just jump in with a question. So one question, well, in fact, I'll ask both questions and then give my take, and then we bring it out to people. One is, how can we encourage more businesses to advertise remote working roles? Now, this is no longer a scary word. So James, I'm going to ask that of you in a second. And then the second question that we have on the chat is, would the panel agree that if employees' personal values are aligned with the corporate ones, then the business will do much better with everyone working towards the same goal? My personal view on that one is yes, and indeed I have left organizations because their values haven't been aligned with mine, and that, you know, that has caused me personally, you know, to make decisions as to whether I stay with a company or not. So and then another question also on values again, which I'll throw out in a second, which is, how do we deal with colleagues or clients not acting in accordance with the organization's values, which is an interesting one. So I'm going to start off with James around how can we start to advertise some of these remote working roles. I'm then going to Eloise and Sarah, if we can briefly talk about, you know, having values that are aligned with corporate ones, and also what do we do if colleagues are not acting in accordance with corporate values? What happens then? So James, quickly to you, and then over to Eloise and Sarah.
I'll answer the question. I think it's great. I think increasingly we are, you know, we definitely are, I think, on behalf of our clients, definitely advertising where remote working is the preferred option, because at the moment it's forced. I think over the future, what has actually changed is people's perceptions of the skill base and talent pool that is available to them if they broaden that ability for people to work remotely. A couple of years ago, it was the preference was, I need someone 5 days a week in the office, regardless of whether actually someone who couldn't commit to that had better experience and skill levels to match the role profile, as it were. Because of what's happened over the last year, I think that is only going to increase, and we've definitely seen it, the speed in which clients, law firms are happy to incorporate people who are working completely remotely to support their teams. So I think it's something we're pushing. I think it's law firms are pushing. I think that will continue over the next 6 months to 12 months, because the talent pool that is available for people who are working remotely is far greater than a talent pool that may be tied to a particular location that a role is in.
Thanks, James. So I'm going to ask Eloise, I'm going to ask about, you know, whether you think having personal values aligned with corporate ones helps the business. And then Sarah, I'm going to ask you, what do you do? Because I know that Herbert Smith is a value-driven business. What do you do if you've got colleagues or clients that aren't acting in accordance with the values? So Eloise first.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely it's more advantageous to both like employee and employer if the values are aligned. I would say maybe like as an individual, your personal value set is never going to be perfectly aligned with like a giant corporate organization, mainly because like you're not, well, most people are not like purely profit driven like enterprises, and obviously a lot of law firms have different values as well, but like at the heart of it, it's still like a business. And I think as an individual, your values are always going to be slightly different, and also you should have the freedom to like let your values evolve over time and let your values change, and maybe like, you know, shape your career around that. So I guess as an individual, I'd probably say I personally wouldn't like get too caught up in like making my values like perfectly fit like a mission statement from a company. I'd rather like find them and like navigate them on my own, and then find an organization that is broadly aligned with that. But in answer to the question, like 100%, if there can be some kind of alignment, then I think that's going to work best for both people.
Fantastic. And Sarah, what do you do if there are people that aren't acting in line with values? Is there anything that you do at Herbert Smith?
You've got to call it out. You've got to call out those kind of behaviours, whatever they are, and however most of the time they're not badly intentioned. You know, people have best intentions, but perhaps they use the wrong language, give a poor example, or whatever it might be. But you've got to call it out. And as leaders in the business, the onus is really on you to make sure you do that. Obviously, don't do it necessarily publicly. We're not talking about naming and shaming. That isn't how you drive changes in behaviour. But you've got to speak to the individual concerned to ensure that they know that, you know, that they haven't acted in the way we might have wanted them to, and they can correct it. Or if they don't, then I guess ultimately you've got to escalate it through HR. But in my experience of these situations, because they do, they do come up occasionally, even in a values-driven business such as ours, most of the time it's genuine mistake, and people are horrified when you point it out, and they're willing and happy to change. Otherwise, I guess, maybe they do decide to move on.
Thanks. And finally from you, Susan, as a client, is it also, do you think, clients' role to call out where you see clients not acting in accordance with values?
Well, yes, I think, yes, absolutely. I mean, Shell has business principles that we expect us to abide by, as well as the people we do business with. So I think that's important. I mean, I think, just to build on what Sarah said, these things have to be part of the culture of the organisation, the values. And that's about making sure people are aware of them. I mean, obviously from our poll, we saw that not everybody is amazingly familiar sometimes with their organisation's values, and that may be because they haven't been well communicated. And the other thing is about making them part, as I say, part of the culture. And that can be done by, for example, in legal, we have behaviours, foundational behaviours actually, they're called, 5 of them. And they're sort of like our values. There are values about how we do things. So it's as when you have your appraisal as a part every year, it's you're judged not on what you've delivered and what you've done, but how you've done it. And actually, definitely 50-50. In many cases, it's more important how you've behaved, how you've delivered what you've delivered, than what you've actually delivered. I mean, obviously not completely, because we're a business and we have to make money, but how we do things is definitely equally as important as what we do.
Thanks, Susan. I think one of the nicest quotes I always come back to is that you should live and not laminate your values. And so many companies stick them on a wall and then forget about them. And it's really lovely to have this conversation where, everyone online is really living those values. So I think we've slightly run over, so apologies to those people who did have a hard close at 1. I know a couple of people had left. For those of you that want to hear more from our panelists and you haven't already listened to our podcast series, do visit lawyercoach.co.uk, where you can listen to all of the various podcasts. Oliver and I are currently mid-recording the next season, which is also going to be fascinating, so keep an eye out for that. But I just want to say thank you ever so much to all of you for joining us. Oliver, I don't know if you I'll give you the final word.
Was that handed over to me? I couldn't
final
hear
word from you.
No, it's been brilliant. It was great to listen back to the last series and to get all that, as I said, optimism. Thanks to all the panelists, and listen out for series 3, because it's going to be a fascinating listen as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks to everyone, and happy Christmas to everyone if you celebrate Christmas.
Thanks ever so much. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you.